Hello, everyone. I wanted to give you a little bit of a introduction to Thucydides. I'm sorry I didn't have this posted earlier, but this is a brief introduction to uh, Thucydides, the Peloponnesian War. You have your book here, which is a kind of a condensed version by Paul Woodruff. He's taken what he believes to be the central parts from a much longer work. Be about 400 pages if the whole thing were there, and tried to draw out what he thinks are the most important things that Thucydides has to say while preserving the narrative of the war. Thucydides was an Athenian general from a wealthier group within the city. Only wealthier men would usually be elected generals. They didn't get paid for it. And you can see the background to both Athens and Sparta in the developments 1.3 and 1.4. Thucydides was from a wealthier, more aristocratic class in Athens. And therefore, he probably has some sympathy with that group against those who would be more enthusiastic about democracy, more skeptical of the people and the wisdom of the common man who was voting in the Athenian assembly, and also skeptical of those who could appeal to the common man. Not all of them, but to some of them. Paul Woodruff, for example, thinks that he's pretty sympathetic to Pericles. Okay. Next, it's important to look at developments 1.3 and 1.4, but just to point a few things out about the background. Remember that in ancient Greece, there's no country called ancient Greece. It is a region in modern day Greece and southern Italy and Sicily and western Turkey around the Aegean Sea, a region that has a lot of independent city-states. The Greeks called these poles. The singular was polis, where we get the word political. And so each city-state was independent. Some of them were just almost villages. Some of them were fairly large cities like Athens. And they were independent from each other. They spoke similar languages. They spoke ancient Greek, different dialects of ancient Greek. They considered themselves Greeks, but not one united country, one united political entity. All right. And so they fought each other a lot. Sometimes some of them would league together. But the two major associations of city-states at the time of Thucydides' writing were Athens' Delian League, okay, or what he calls the Athenian Empire. And this was a group of city-states led by Athens. And then there was the Peloponnesian League, or the Peloponnesians, dominated by the Spartans. This was an older alliance. You can see descriptions of those in 1.3 and 1.4 developments. And so that's an important point. These are the two kind of rival power blocks. Okay, the Athenians tended to support democracies and support the elements in these cities that wanted democracies. The Peloponnesian League, led by the Spartans, tended to support the rule of oligarchs, of the wealthier groups. Okay, and so there was a cultural and political rivalry between these blocks too. Another thing to point out is that the Spartans are often referred to as the Lacedaemonians or the Laconians, and that's just something to realize as well. Finally, just regarding Thucydides' methods, on pages 12 and 13 of your book, he talks about the methods that he uses to construct this narrative. Okay, he says that he did a lot of investigation to try to present a fair account of it. And one of the things that's really important about this book is that it is kind of one of the foundational works of history, because it is based on inquiry into the causes of the war to try to give a faithful, accurate account of the war. Now, Thucydides also presents the speeches of the people that he's talking about. And he has this statement on page 13. He says, at the very top of page 13, what particular people said in their speeches, either just before or during the war, was hard to recall exactly. Whether they were speeches I heard myself or those that were reported to me at second hand. I have made each speaker say what I thought the situation demanded, keeping as near as possible to the general sense of what was actually said. Okay. So he wasn't there for all the speeches. He wasn't able to recall them word for word. He didn't have someone writing them down. And so he takes some license that a historian today would get in big trouble for. But he's upfront that he's not reporting exactly what was said. Now the question becomes, how literally should we take these speeches? Are they sort of in Thucydides' words? Is he making them up? How does he approach this? Well, Paul Woodruff, your translator, thinks that one of the things we can keep in mind is through these speeches is that Thucydides sees himself as bringing hidden motivations to light. So actual speakers might be more likely to fudge, to lie. Thucydides speakers oftentimes are honest, maybe to the point of not being so wise anymore, claiming that the strong have a right to dominate the weak, for example. Okay, most people aren't necessarily going to just say that out and out, and so he thinks oftentimes in these speeches, Thucydides is saying, "Here's what the real motivations of this person were, and I'm going to put that into a speech." Sometimes it's a paraphrase. Sometimes it might be up to him to just invent what he thinks the real motivations were, okay, or portray what he thinks the real motivations are. That's what your translator thinks. And you can see this in the introduction where he talks about the speeches. Okay, if you want to read the introduction, you're not required to, but it's of course very helpful. Another way to think of it is, well, he never even finished the Peloponnesian War. Jeremy Minot points this out in his edition of the book. The Peloponnesian War, the book, was never actually finished. Thucydides died beforehand. And so in some ways, we're looking at a work in progress. And so with any primary source about history, the reader does have to try to decide, all right, what do I trust? What is not being presented? What can I actually learn about the past? Maintaining some level of skepticism about anything produced by mere human beings. And so that's the same with Thucydides, the Peloponnesian War. And that's okay. That's part of the process of learning about history. Okay. Glad to answer any questions you have about it. I hope you enjoy the book. It is challenging, but we'll learn about it together. Thanks, everyone.